Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of The Horse of Course, the official Valley podcast. Today, we talk to Daisy Chui from Harmony House. Harmony House is a NGO, a cause. It's a one-stop anti-domestic violence service agency in Hong Kong that's been put under incredible stress during the COVID lockdown over the last few months. At Valley, we decided to support Harmony House, raise money, raise awareness during a pre-season challenge of ours on June 27th. So we decided to talk to Daisy, get to understand a little bit more about the agency, the great work they do, and the terrible implications of domestic violence on society. Hope you enjoy this episode, and please do visit their website if you feel that you can help or that you feel that you might want to talk to somebody. Okay, we are now very lucky to have a board member of Harmony House on the show today, Miss Daisy Chui. Hello, Daisy.
Hi, thanks for having me, Grant.
Yeah, no worries. So Harmony House is a one-stop anti-domestic violence service agency that is obviously had its resources seriously stretched during recent events of, home sort of isolation and lockdowns. Yes. Before we get into the agency and what it does, the great work it does, a little bit about yourself, Daisy. You're a board member, which means you offer up your time to the agency. But
yes,
you're a Hong Kong girl through and through, born and bred.
Yes, I am. So I was born here in Hong Kong. When I was young, we immigrated to Australia, but we eventually came back, and so I studied here and went to UK for university, but there's no other place called home. Hong Kong is definitely home. So I joined a bank after coming back from university, and then became a mom. And then I joined Harmony House almost 3 years ago.
Okay, and you mentioned becoming a mum, and coincidentally, you have twin boys who play at Valley Fort, am I right?
Yes, they do play at Valley Fort. So I have 3 boys, and my twins play at Valley Fort. So we've been with the fort for 2 years now. Unfortunately, with everything that's happened, they've, practices have been cancelled. But the boys are really looking forward to the new season come August, September, just to get back on the field and see their friends again.
And would you describe yourself as a rugby mum?
Yes. Unfortunately, I think it just brought out a side of me that I didn't even know I had. I think, at tournaments on the sidelines, I'm louder than my husband. And sometimes I'm shocked by just how over enthusiastic I am. Yeah. I think they're too young to be embarrassed, but we'll see how that goes. They probably won't want me to go to tournaments when they grow older.
They're never too young. I mean, my wife's the same, and she loves sports, but never been around rugby. And my girls are 7 and 9. They are also a little bit, shh, mum, keep quiet on the sidelines.
Well, mums will never be quiet. We're only cheering because we love our kids, right? So
yeah. So, how did you get involved with Harmony House? How has this come about? And I'm sorry, why don't we just firstly, before we get to that, give us an overview, please, of Harmony House. I think it's been around since '85. What does it do in the community?
Sure. So Harmony House, we're celebrating our 35th year this year, and it was established in 1985. And it was actually the first shelter that was established in Hong Kong for abused women and their children. So Harmony House was actually founded by an Irishman, Thomas Mulvey, who, along with some other different people from different walks of life, from Dr. Judith McKay, who was a physician who worked at a hospital. We had Miss Pam Baker, who was a lawyer, and Thomas Mulvey was actually the head of the Family Welfare Society back in the day. And so he realized and noticed the trend of abused women and not having anywhere else to go. So in '85, Harmony House was established, and we were the first organization in Hong Kong to have a shelter that provided some refuge for abused women and their children. And from there, it's grown to basically an NGO that provides a through train of services all the way from prevention, education, going to schools, and providing counseling services, advocacy, consultation with the government in terms of how we can better promote and better educate the society and community, and even helping out with drafting laws and providing legal aid as well for the vulnerable people that suffer from domestic violence.
Yeah. So, what are the major forms, or not maybe symptoms, but causes? What are the biggest contributing factors? Is there anything unique to Hong Kong that maybe I come from New Zealand, but
Yeah.
or is it a common sort of set of circumstances globally? Is there anything unique in Hong Kong?
I think, well, the domestic violence doesn't discriminate. I think it happens to anyone and everyone anywhere. I think if you're talking about specifically with Hong Kong, and it's something that's quite common that you see in Asian countries, is I think the silence and the taboo that surrounds this particular subject. I think particularly for a lot of women. Now, I'm not the majority of victims, mainly still women. And children, but I think increasingly so, actually, we do see male victims. And in Asia, particularly, though, I think it's the matter that you don't want to talk about it because it's shameful. Yeah. You think it's taken very personally. It's seen as a failure of yourself not being able to hold your family together. It's a failure of not wanting your family members to worry. It's about wanting to keep a cohesive family unit together for the sake of the children. But I think the irony is very often it's probably not better for anyone in these type of circumstances, for yourself as a victim, for the children that are witnessing, or in many cases, unfortunately, also subject to physical abuse as well from the perpetrator. So in Hong Kong specifically, I think I think in any country, you do see waves of cases. Often in times of economic downturn, you see an increase of cases. I think, but with COVID-19, I think with the coronavirus this year, I think worldwide, you've really just seen a massive increase of domestic violence cases. And I think for a lot of the younger generation, we haven't had a global pandemic as such. This is something that's new for so many people. Hong Kong, in some way or another, has actually been more fortunate because we haven't had severe strict lockdowns, for example, where in France or in Italy or in Spain, there's been government lockdowns where there absolutely is nowhere else for you to go if you're in a domestic violent household. I think in UK, Boots was actually very good, where so many of the NGOs that help victims of domestic violence had just been inundated with calls with people seeking for help, but there was nowhere to go. So Boots Pharmacy opened up their consultation rooms because it was still one of the essential services that was still open for people to seek refuge and to seek help. Similarly, in France, you had code words where if, let's say, the victim could at least go out to a pharmacy, and then if the code word was a mask 19. If the pharmacies were educated, if someone came and said the code word, then you knew they were someone that was suffering from domestic violence, and they were trained to seek help for these victims. Now, for Harmony House specifically in Hong Kong, we've had an increase of almost 50% of calls to our hotlines, and our shelter's been full for the past 2 months. So we have just over 70 places in our shelter, which is actually the largest shelter in Hong Kong. There's a couple of other shelters, but our shelter's been full since end of February. And again, it's due to the pandemic. People are afraid. They feel that they're worried to go out. They've been advised to not go out, with all the social distancing measures that the government had put in place. So it's a feeling of feeling lost and feeling vulnerable, but also feeling anxious, and unemployment doesn't help as well. So I think people that maybe depended on a couple of temporary jobs just to support their family's livelihood, a lot of those jobs were also gone during the pandemic. And even now, I think unemployment is at the highest in Hong Kong over the last decade. And basically, these people have nowhere to go. And I think tensions rise. Children aren't going to school. Everyone's just trapped in, unfortunately, just small households in Hong Kong as well. So again, domestic violence doesn't discriminate. It happens everywhere. But the pandemic really has brought this issue to light. And in a way, I guess it's a good thing, because people do have to talk about it. It's something that's everywhere. It's something that's around, and more people need to know these things happen. And the more awareness that people have of it, the more alert people are of the resources and the help that they can seek if they are subject to any type of domestic violence abuse.
Yeah. So, I was back in New Zealand for the last few months, and the headlines there as well were, domestic violence was spiking. And when I came back here and read a headline in the South China Morning Post that I think the headline was, trapped with a monster sort of thing. And I can only imagine just how horrible that must be. I mean, I joke that I'm trapped with some monsters in my house. They're them under the age of 9. But jesting aside, we've been back in lockdown for 2 weeks now. I've still got my bracelet on, but even in New Zealand, we were locked down. But we had a lot more space. We were allowed out to the park and stuff, but at least there were big houses. We could have our own rooms. We had a garden. Stayed at my sister's. We're quite lucky. But, since coming back to Hong Kong, we have our 750 square feet. And there's no respite. I mean, and we have a pretty harmonious house, I would say. But even you just all day long, you start to sort of annoy each other, just through proximity and stuff like that. And you have to
proximity, absolutely. And I think actually, specific to Hong Kong as well, I think in the beginning, Hong Kong was one of the first places to report cases, and then afterwards, it became sort of, oh wow. People were so diligent, and we had gotten the situation under good control, and a lot of people started coming back. And I think just the dynamics of the population and the types of relationships people have here. I think previously, even if they were wives and husbands, maybe they just were together on paper, but maybe they weren't living together anymore. Maybe some people were actually living across the border in Shenzhen or in Guangzhou province. I think Hong Kong became a safer place to be in. So a lot of people came back to Hong Kong just to feel safe. And then again, I think couples that previously weren't together, being together again in a tight space, I think that also doesn't help in terms of, for those couples that previously weren't together and had cross-border relationships, but then again, coming back together again.
Yeah. So what's the engine behind Harmony House? There's obviously a lot of volunteers. How many sort of volunteers work with Harmony House? What sort of work are they doing? And I'll just flash some photos up as we talk about this.
Sure. Harmony House, we, as I mentioned previously, we offer a whole range of services. We're basically a one-stop shop. So mainly our projects are financed by foundations. We've got Jockey Club, we've got Community Chest. And one of our main services is obviously the shelter, which victims and their children can come to. The pictures you're flashing up there right now, the top right, where we have storytelling for children, where we actually, as part of our education program, we have 2 centers actually that run local programs for the local communities. And so we have storytelling sessions, and then we also have, as part of programs for children, we teach them about emotion management. We also teach them about how to protect themselves. The one just below me, it's actually a group of women cooking together. So those are actually the people, the women that are seeking refuge at our shelter. And I think what we try to do at the shelter is to create a supportive environment. And especially during festivals, a Chinese New Year or Christmas or whatnot, we'll have activities for everyone to come together, and we have women support groups within the shelter, along with our social workers and our counselors that guide them and enable them to have a voice and speak out. And And then also these type of activities where you're cooking together. So it's a sense of community and the feeling that you can develop these relationships. So eventually when they leave our shelter, there's still a community and a support group and new friends that have the same experiences, and they can rely on each other for support. We also actually have a mobile school. So the truck you see is actually a mobile center that goes around to all the different schools. We go to local schools and we teach different kids about, again, emotion management, relationship dynamics, and it ranges from primary school where we're teaching children how to protect themselves or how to release their emotions, but also for teenagers, we talk about relationship dynamics. We talk about dating and dating violence, because actually very often maybe teenagers, they don't realize sometimes that when you're dating, there's certain respect that as a couple you have to give to each other. So we go to secondary schools where we teach young teenagers about the type of respect that as young teenagers, and if you're dating as a couple, the type of respect that you should show each other. Because very often maybe young people don't realize, but dating violence can actually lead to, it causes emotional damage that can actually be reflected further on in life when you grow up and you become parents, or it's about how to manage and respect different people and relationship dynamics. Then we also go out to the community and even work with government departments. For example, we go to the hospital authority and we teach frontline staff at hospitals how to possibly identify victims of domestic violence. We also go work with the police and we train police on what are some methods to help calm down couples that they may encounter if they are ever called up to any homes that may be suffering from domestic violence as well. So it's a whole range of services. We also have volunteers that come and man our 24-hour hotlines, hotlines for men and women and children that call in to seek help or advice. We also work with some organizations. So we work with corporates that sometimes will go on outings with susceptible families. And yeah, so we have a whole range of services.
That really is a wide range, and
Yes.
yeah, that's really interesting around teenagers, and those are difficult years to navigate at the best of
Yes.
times, especially with pressures from social media and
Oh,
you know.
it's a social media has definitely brought out a whole different level of. I think it's not just I think teenage pressures, but cyberbullying, and I think in terms of just I think you hear of these horror stories where maybe personal pictures between a couple then get circulated amongst friends, and that could lead to a lot of. And I think it's this type of dynamic, and I think it's teaching the privacy and teaching respect and teaching boundaries that if you're going into a relationship, these are boundaries that you need to respect, both men and women actually.
Yeah, and as parents, those are subjects very close to us as our kids develop, and
Yes.
it's great knowing there's resource out there for them. What's a channel then for, let's say, perpetrators of domestic violence who realize that they've overstepped boundaries once or more, or afraid of themselves and not sure who to turn to themselves? It's not the sort of thing you would talk to your mates about,
Yeah.
but what sort of avenue for those people?
I think in terms of Harmony House, I think for any NGO or any charity that tries to help victims of domestic violence, we always have services, and particularly counseling and therapy sessions that are offered for these perpetrators of what the official term is batterers. the hardest thing is to convince them to actually seek help themselves, right? Because I think for so many of them, again, there's the tabooness. Who would ever want to admit they're a bully, or who would ever want to admit that they are suffering in a way where they feel there's no other outlet than to, or their form of outburst is to physically hurt someone that supposedly are your loved ones, right?
Mm.
Very often for Harmony House, we talk to our victims, the ones that come to our shelter, and for those that decide to go back to their families and face their perpetrator, at the end of the day, they are the ones that will try to reach out to their husbands or their partners and be like, hey, we've got an issue. I think it takes two to tango. First of all, what we do is we encourage couples therapy. So as a unit, they come back together and so that they can work on their relationship together. Then we have separate programs specifically for the perpetrators that helps us provide therapy and provide counseling for them to overcome and for them to realize very often it's just a breakdown in communication. And there's always a choice as to how you choose to communicate and how you choose to express your feelings to the other person. So it always starts with the couple willing to come together first to work as a team. And then but at the end of the day, it can't be something that's forced. It has to be something that has to come internally from them. We have definitely had successful cases of such. And we have perpetrators that become sort of ambassadors for us that try to reach out and be like, hey, I was there before. I realized I was wrong. We just need to work on our communication. And they talk to other people as well and spread the message that it's about building a harmonious family and building a harmonious family unit. And through whatever ups and downs that a family comes across, they can work through it together through non-violent means.
Yeah. So if the viewers would like to get involved or help or, whether it's time or money or resources, how can they sort of reach out and get involved?
I think, first of all, I think the easiest thing is just to talk about it. I think it's all about raising awareness. It's all about not avoiding the subject. And I think in Hong Kong anyway, locally, again, as I previously mentioned, there's that taboo that's associated with feeling a sense of defeat if you're a victim, a sense of you don't want to be judged if you are in a domestic violence household. I think it helps even if you're a friend, and I think certain signs that you might notice if a friend, they might be a bit off, if suddenly changes in their personality or suddenly they've gone quiet, or I think just reaching out and I think not specifically saying or asking, are you okay? Is your husband beating you or is your wife beating you? And not like that, but I think just asking, how are you? Is everything okay? And I think sometimes it's just someone reaching out and giving you that time of the day to see how you are. Very often that brings out, that enables people to open up and to talk about whatever it is that they're going through.
And in that sense, it's very similar to the increased profile of mental health issues in society, right? Where
yes.
Exactly the same issue where people don't feel like they can talk about it, they bottle stuff up.
Yes.
It has disastrous effects.
Yes, absolutely. And I think if for children as well, I think there's similar signs where if suddenly a relatively bubbly child suddenly becomes quite reclusive, I think, and for the children, they might not actually have physical signs of abuse, right? But I think it's just emotionally and mentally, if you're in a household that maybe your parents are just fighting all the time, there might be sudden tantrums or outbursts. And Harmony House does actually go into schools, local schools, and train teachers to also to also identify and to see certain signs of changes in children in order to see if they might be subject or they might be living in a domestic violent household. And very often, then they're able to get the child to talk about it, and then we're able to come in and help them and provide the counseling or refer them to social welfare department for the counseling resources that they have. I think in terms of COVID, I think not only just Harmony House, I think just throughout the whole charity sector, we've found it difficult. We've already had, we've been very fortunate where we've had donations of masks, especially for our shelter. I think we've had to be extra diligent in terms of keeping clean. At the end of the day, there are still shared spaces that families have to share at our shelter. We've been a lot more stringent in terms of cleanliness and hygiene, and providing masks and hand sanitizers and everything for the people that are staying at our shelter. But we've also set up an emergency fund where I think just not only domestic violence, but I think the anxiety and the invisible pressures that people feel due to the coronavirus, we've noticed more people needing actual psychiatric assessments where they might actually need to go on medication. So our emergency fund, for one portion of that goes to actually providing going private, basically, and not waiting for the government. We're going private to psychiatrists to make sure that they get the initial assessment, and if they do need to go on medication, then at least that's quite urgent. So part of the fund goes towards excuse me, providing money for people to go to private doctors. And then there's also the issue where previously, if people were feeling ill during their stay at our shelter, they would just go to a normal hospital emergency outpatient. But we would also provide funds now for them to go to private doctors, just to avoid crowds and just to get the medical attention that they need, rather than having to wait for a long time.
Yeah, it's a vast subject, and I think you've helped really to raise the level of understanding of the viewers, our members, about the work of the agency.
Yeah,
we've decided to do a fundraising event. It's a pre-season event. We've talked about it. It's called the Everest Challenge.
So exciting.
Yeah. So June 27th, as a pre-season sort of event where our hockey, netball, and rugby players, kids as well, are going to be doing some pre-season training by climbing Ladder Street at least 1,000 times over a 12-hour period on June 27th. And we wanted to help raise money for two agencies that we feel have been put under stress, even more stress by COVID and, the protests recently. So Harmony House was, we made investigations, and all roads led back to Harmony House in the area of domestic violence. As I said, I'd seen that headline about, spiking domestic violence, and it seemed like something we should try and help not only raise funds but awareness for. The other one is Feeding Hong Kong. So we hope that the viewers and supporters of Harmony House might come down on the day and support.
Absolutely. I mean, we're really just so grateful. I think just helping, with people like, I think people at Valley are just really passionate, supportive. We have such a supportive community, and I think being part of that community, you really see people caring for each other. And so, again, on behalf of Harmony House, thank you so much for having chosen us and helping to raise awareness on this very pressing issue, not just for Hong Kong, but just worldwide and in general. Just raising the awareness is really important. We're so grateful for that. And yes, definitely we will. I think it's a really meaningful challenge. Just to get everyone fit again. I think, during this pandemic, everyone needs to exercise and work out and stay healthy. But I think just all walks of life. I think this ladder challenge, I think everyone just goes. It's an uphill struggle for everyone, and I think it's just such good messaging that we can all overcome it together. And as long as we stick together, we we support each other. So thank you so much for choosing us as one of your beneficiaries.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I want to thank you again, Daisy, for joining us today and spending time with us and sort of sharing what the agency Harmony House is all about.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work. It's amazing what you do along with Feeding Hong Kong. It's very generous work and time and really, really great causes. So thanks very much. And
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
I'll see you on June the 27th.
Yeah, bring your runners.
I will.
Up Street a few times.
Great. Thank you so much.